Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Happy birthday week to you, Bill Scher.
Thank you very much. So I happen to have, I wasn't planning to do this, but I happen to have next to me, hold on one second. This is my book stash, my book haul for my birthday. Sometimes I get new books, but I always try to tell folks give me used hardcovers because they're cheap. But this is the brand new. This is just published this week. The Unexpected President: The Life and Times of Chester Arthur by Scott Greenberger. And I'm super mad because I have read some stuff about Chester Arthur before, and he's fascinating because he was the consummate political hack for coming out of the spoil system, but he signed into law the civil service reform that created the civil service that we have today. And I'd also read that he had burned all his personal papers, so it's very hard to write about him. So I was like, there's no way you can write a Chester Arthur book because civil service reform is so boring, and he burned all his personal papers. How are you going to do it? And this guy pulled it off. He got a New Yorker review this month. So kudos to Scott Greenberger for making that happen. I'm going a little bit beyond.
If you can make a Chester Arthur interesting,
exactly,
you deserve a Pulitzer.
Now, I'm going a little bit beyond presidential books for this birthday. I'm trying to think about other important figures in history. This is a relatively new Booker T. Washington biography, up from history.
He's doing great work, by the way.
Yeah.
More and more. Every day I'm hearing more about him.
Hubert Humphrey, the man who made the Democratic Party a civil rights party. Very important figure. This is one of my favorite people I want to learn more about. Edward Stettinius. He is the man who created the UN.
That's interesting. Though you've written a little bit about.
I wrote about the creation of the UN. My main interest in this was I wrote a piece of Politico 3 years ago about how we spied on everybody. We used the precursor of the NSA to spy on all our allies, find out what their problems were in advance of the UN conference, and then use that information to nip those problems in the bud. So these are his diaries. Edward Stettinius' diary. So he was Secretary of State under FDR and Truman. He then became the first representative to the UN after it was created, and he died shortly thereafter. And he's completely forgotten in history. So I'm fascinated by that. And this is Wedding of the Waters, the Erie Canal and the Making of a Great Nation. And I'm getting interested in early infrastructure. You know, how is it that we because the Jeffersonian Republicans were anti-federal spending on infrastructure. And I'm reading right now a Martin Van Buren biography. And Van Buren, as a counselor to Andrew Jackson, counseled against federal spending on infrastructure, and there are several vetoes of infrastructure bills under Jackson's watch. But when Van Buren was in New York running the Albany Regency political machine, he capitulated and voted for the Erie Canal, even though it was the project of their chief rivals, Governor DeWitt Clinton, because they did as a politically expedient vote. So
I'm sensing a coming Politico magazine piece about how the fight over infrastructure is nothing new. We've been doing this.
The brain is churning
all along.
This is what it's all about: finding nuggets to put into Politico articles. That's
the thing with writing is you've got to be feeding yourself, your soul, so that if all you do is give, right? You're just giving opinions, giving what you know, but you're never feeding. There's no, then you got to have that balance. You've got to be feeding the soul with information, the brain, so that you can then give to the audience. So that's what this is.
But I feel like how can you need those little nuggets, of those factoids that are not sort of the off-the-shelf conventional wisdom, or else the piece isn't interesting. And I just feel like I could just read books all day long, just hunting for nuggets.
And this is what it keeps it from being just a hackneyed thing. I mean, you were actually, with your writing, there's a purpose to it. You were actually educating the public a little bit, enlightening them about history. The piece might be about something modern day, current events, but you're injecting a little context, historical context to whatever you're writing.
I try.
I find that very cool. So I guess two things I want to say about that before we move on. one thing I want to say and then one question. The thing I want to say is I think it's incumbent upon all of us to have a hobby. Mm-hmm. So Bill Scher is easy to shop for. You buy him a book, hopefully the more obscure history book you can find, the better.
Yes.
And you buy me an Orioles something, whatever, that's a good gift for me. The worst guy in the world is a guy who doesn't drink, doesn't have a hobby. Where you get that guy, right? So, I think it's good. I think it's incumbent upon everyone at the age of 18 to declare a major. 2 or 3 things you could always buy me, and it would be a good present.
And I always tell people, get the used hardcover. You can usually get it for $2-3, whether it's in a used bookstore or off of Amazon. I usually try to. If people are interested in books, Western Mass has a lot of really great used bookstores. There's actually been New York Times articles like used book trails in Western Mass. And you can find.
Where you found my original copy of the Whitaker Chambers.
Yes, well, that was in Vermont, but still, you can in the region. In the region, it's just amazing what you can find. And I actually was when I was in Cape Cod. There's a really great used bookstore there called Parnassus in Yarmouth. And then I just finished reading Steve Inkeep's Jacksonland, and he cites Paranis Bookstore in his acknowledgments for finding several of the books that he used in his research for Jacksonland.
Now, I have a question for you, and this actually comes from our friend Christy Spates down in the Houston area, who recalled that you've established a tradition on your birthday.
Yes.
Where you set the agenda. You basically say at 8 o'clock I'm going to get donuts. At 10 o'clock I'm going bowling. At noon, whatever. And you do a full day that you unilaterally decide what you want to do.
Yep.
And then you let word go out to all. If you want to join me, I will be at the donut shop at 8 a.m. Did you do it again this year?
That's what I did. I largely followed that schedule. It was early donuts, so 6:30 donuts, 6:30 donut run. But then we ate the donuts. I was going to eat at the top of Mount Skinner, which is one of the mountain tops here in Western Mass, with a beautiful panoramic view of the Connecticut River. Although I did not know that you can't get parking at the top of the mountain until 9 o'clock in the morning. So we actually ate the donuts at the bottom of the mountain and then went to the top after we ate. And then we did classic candle pin bowling, the only kind of bowling, in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts.
Are these the little balls?
Little balls, straight pins.
Aren't they all called duck
pin bowling is a little different. It's small balls, but the pins are more short and squat. More shaped like what you think of a bowling pin. Kind of round and fat on the bottom. Candle pins are straight sticks.
Now the kingpin bowling, where you put your fingers in those 3 holes.
Yeah.
That's where people join bowling leagues and get really good at it.
There are candle pin bowling leagues around here.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Is it just for fun, or do people take it really seriously?
There are still candle pin bowling leagues. There are candle pin record keepers. There is candlepin bowling on TV on New England cable TV stations.
Is this a New England specific?
Yeah, it's very. I mean, it's not quite strictly New England, but it's very dominant in New England relative to. There's a little bit in. I think there's some duck pin or candlepin in Maryland, 1 or 2 places.
I used to definitely go duck pin bowling when I was a kid. I don't know that I'd heard of candlepin.
Yeah, I think candle might even be even more tightly restricted too.
But with little kid, if you're a kid, the duck pins are. The smaller balls are better.
Yeah, and duck pin is easier than candle pin because the pins are a little fatter. So no one has ever bowled a perfect 300 in candle pin. It has never happened in all of history. And you get 3 tries. You get 3 balls per frame. Yeah. And people still did do it. The record is 245.
Wow. And you got that record back in the 80s. So. I want to hear more about the day, but let me stop you. You did this, correct me if I'm wrong, you did this on the Sunday before your birthday.
Yeah, it's hard to do this on a work day, of course.
Okay. The reason I ask is, number one, I know I emailed you and you said you were going bowling. I emailed you on Sunday. So I assume that was when. But maybe you're practicing for the big day.
No. That was for the big day.
And then the second thing is, for those of us who aspire to do the Bill Scher birthday method, we need to know the rules, so you can do it the Sunday before your birthday.
Yeah,
I assume if it falls within a day or two, you wouldn't do a Sunday if it's a you have to time it right.
Well, I've had my birthday weekend boxed out by other people's events, so I've done it, a week after. I'm not finicky on that score. But the point is, you get a day. You get a day to yourself, and I suggest you want to spread out your events. The whole driving force of the a la carte birthday is low stress.
Yes.
So if you're jamming too much in, you're adding stress to the day. So 6:30 a.m. donut run, which I did without my children.
Right.
So I get that hour, to myself.
How many people? I assume you emailed this. How many people on the invite list?
It was about a dozen, I think.
Okay.
But one guy went with me to get donuts at 6:30. A larger group met me at Mount Skinner to eat the donuts. Nobody came to bowling this year. I can tell you, I have two friends that came late, and we ended up having.
But that's
finished.
Okay, right? You have to embrace the fact that, like, if they come, they come. If they don't, they don't.
That's right. That's right. The point is, I got the bowl, and that's what matters. But there's Candlepin and Shelburne Falls, Mass, which is like, this is one of the great small towns in the country, Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. You could like do your vacation in just Shelburne Falls, and you'll be thrilled. And I won't get into all the reasons why. You folks can look it up, but they have just like the absolute best bowling alley. It's like, right out of early 20th century, 6 lanes. Everything is kept up nice. These like brass ashtrays, ashtray bowls on each alley. So it's just a great place to go. And then walking around town in Shelburne Falls is great. So we walked around town. I got a Adelaide Stevenson political platform for $5 at the local bookstore there. And then we met at one of the great barbecue places in Western Mass, Local Burgie. Had some barbecue there. I made my own cake. For my birthday. Great there.
You baked your own cake?
And then at night, after the kids went to sleep, I had a movie showing at home.
Well, I was hoping this was going to take a turn for the dark and the seedy.
No, well, not quite, but
then we had the orgy. And so, I'm like, what? I thought I knew Bill Scher. Okay.
This isn't CPAC, Matt.
That was never proven, Bill.
But, so I try to pick a movie that only I want to watch and try to make other people watch it. And so this year, it was Americathon. Do you know Americathon?
Never heard of it.
1979, John Ritter, Harvey Korman, Meatloaf, Elvis Costello.
Wow.
John Ritter plays. So the movie takes place in the future, 1998, where America is lost, is deeply in debt. It's run out of gas. People don't drive their cars anymore. They live in their cars and they ride their bikes everywhere. And we're at $400 billion of debt to the country's richest American, who is a Native American, who runs Nike. Although the Nike stands for something else, but it's still like a apparel company. And one day he says, "I want my money back. I need to eat too." And so America needs to pay up all of a sudden, even though America's broke. So President Chet Roosevelt, who has already sold the White House and lives in a bungalow in Southern California, clearly modeled on a Jerry Brown, Governor Moonbeep type character.
It sounds like the poor man's Idiocracy.
It is sort of like that. He announces a 30-day telethon to raise the money so America doesn't go broke and be taken over by the United Hebrew Republic, the Jewish Arab coalition, who essentially are a terrorist rogue country.
So how many people showed up to see this, Bill?
One.
Okay.
One friend and my wife suffered through it too.
That's your best friend right there.
That's right.
That person is the. I have to say, I've not seen that, but John Ritter, his death, I mean, he died like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, but his death really hit me. That was one of them. I think there are different celebrity deaths that hit you different ways. Yeah. And his death really hit me because I remember him being kind of young and cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The Three's Company.
Like Three's Company, especially in the early like seasons.
Not Hooperman.
Not Hooperman, and not what was the child?
Was he in Problem Child?
Yeah, I think he was. So, well, happy birthday, Bill.
Thank you.
And I always say, sadly, my birthday was like 2 weeks ago, but I feel like every year, if your birthday was before mine, it would remind me of this. And then, like, if my birthday was in October, I would do this. It takes some planning, but I love the concept. I love the idea. I love the concept.
I feel it's less planning than a party. A party is work.
Yes, and then you're the one doing the work. You're supposed to be celebrating the birthday, and you're entertaining.
Right? Who needs
this?
That?
This is like less pressure. I like this. I hope this idea spreads, just like I hope the idea of boycotting the NFL also catches on nationally.
So I'm curious. So here you are. You were ahead of the curve.
Wait, like 2 weeks ahead.
Right. So, I mean, I think there are people on the left talking about boycotting the NFL on the concussion front. You, I think, were the pioneer in saying, I'm going to boycott the NFL for all the reasons.
Yes.
And so then here comes Trump saying NFL ratings are down because these feckless owners are tolerating their players taking a knee to protest racism during the national anthem. And by the way, they're also becoming wimps because they're changing the rules and taking away the hard hits.
Right.
We want more concussions, not
more
less.
More concussions, right. But less kneeling. Yeah.
This sparks. So your whole point to me, when we talked about a week ago, was you didn't want politics in your sports.
Yes.
You want an escape from all that. Now politics has consumed football. All the players are locking arms or taking knees. Everyone's got an opinion. There's literally no escape. Do you feel like I got out when the getting was good, or?
Yeah, I'm happy. I feel like I was ahead of the curve. No, it is sad.
Are you in agreement with Trump? I mean,
yeah.
you were not happy with Colin Kaepernick, and that was part of your reason for boycotting. So you cheering Trump on in this?
Yeah, sort of. It's nuanced. Okay, so like I agree with everything Trump said. And by the way, I'm also against police abuse too. I mean, like I'm against police brutality. I don't get the connection between refusing to stand up for the pledge of, for the national anthem and being against police brutality. But so I'm sort of, I'm for both of those things. I'm for standing and for stopping police brutality. I agree with everything Trump said, absolutely. And I think in a way, if you believe that a president is supposed to be, like a voice, telling it like it is, and sort of, using the force of his rhetoric, the bully pulpit, to tell people how to behave morally. If that's what you believe, and some people do, libertarians usually don't, but a lot of people, liberals usually do, actually. Then I think then I agreed with what he said. I think you could definitely question whether or not what he said had a positive outcome. I mean, I think we're probably more divided today over this issue than we were before. I think Jake Tapper said the other day there were only 9 players kneeling, the week before Trump said this, and now there were hundreds. So you could certainly argue that he exacerbated the problem. You could certainly argue that you could certainly speculate that maybe he did it for political reasons because he benefits from the culture war, being worse. Having said all of that, do I agree with actually what he said? Yes, I agree with exactly what he said.
Now we had a discussion a couple weeks ago about the Google memo guy.
Yeah.
And you did not want to see Google memo guy get fired for expressing his opinion at the workplace.
I vaguely remember something about this. It's coming back to me.
So is it appropriate for Donald Trump to say, I mean, it's one thing to say, I think your protest is misguided or inappropriate, disrespectful to the flag of the military, whatever. Trump saying owners should fire their players for expressing that opinion in that way on the field. Is
right.
Is Trump, I mean, this is a guy in the campaign that said, we don't have time for political correctness.
Right.
I don't have time to say words in a nice, pretty way for you. We need to get down to business. It seems like it's political correctness for me and not for thee. I don't like the way you're expressing your opinion. So you should be fired and get off my TV set.
Yeah. So first, I would concede that it's very possible that there could be like hypocrisy on this issue. You could have people who thought it was okay to fire the Google guy, thinking it's wrong to fire Colin Kaepernick, and conversely, you could have people who think it's okay to fire Colin Kaepernick, who, by the way, is out of the league anyway, mainly because he's not a good quarterback anymore. He used to be very good. So anyway, it could go both ways. I hope this doesn't come across as hackneyed. I actually see a pretty stark distinction here. So I think probably everyone would agree that that sort of private companies, whether it's the NFL or the San Francisco 49ers or Google, they have if they fire somebody, if they have standards, like you have to wear a white shirt to work, right? You have to wear a white shirt and a necktie. If you refuse to do that, then you can leave. They can fire you. You can quit. But that's not the government that's not the First Amendment violation. That's a company setting up what may be an onerous or archaic rule. But you can either comply with it or you cannot comply with it. I would argue in the case of Google, this person was complying. I forget the dude's name, but the guy who wrote this memo didn't realize that he was not compliant. I believe that there was this intranet where people were allowed to post opinions on it. And so he was complying with that. He posted an opinion, which some people deemed to be politically incorrect, but it was supposed to be private. He believed that he was doing this in a private venue. People disagree with what he had to say, and they leaked it, and it went public. I would say that that's a very different story than what happened in the case of a Colin Kaepernick, who was out publicly on the field on national television, choosing not to stand for the national anthem. And I would say that it would be appropriate for a league to fine him or fire him if they wanted to. Now, they didn't. But the NFL fines people for all sorts of things. Like there was a story where the Dallas Cowboys wanted to wear something honoring Dallas police or the Texas police or something. They were not allowed to do that. You've had players who wanted to wear other political symbols, buttons. Jim McMahon, the old Chicago Bears quarterback in the 80s, used to wear headband.
Roselle.
And he was fined for that, right? So
because he was writing stuff on the headband in a protest to the commissioner.
So that was a political protest, one could argue. So the NFL does reserve the right to decide that some political comments are inappropriate and that they can fine you or potentially fire you for noncompliance. So that's a long way of saying that that although I see the potential for hypocrisy here, I would argue that those are two different things.
Well, I think I said with the Google thing, if I was in Google's position, I would not have fired him. I would have addressed the problem in a different way. But they certainly have the right to fire him. He was working at will. Google can say, "Hey, you're disrupting the workplace and making it hard for our female employees to feel that they are being respected here, and so we can't have this." An NFL owner has the right to say, "Hey, this is killing our merchandising revenue. We have always conservative fans, and they don't want to buy our jerseys anymore. This is not the image we want for our team. Sorry, we can't do this." They have the right to do that. But is it a good idea to do that? There was the Trevor Noah Daily Show piece the other day saying, when is it okay for blacks to protest? And all the ways that people say, "Oh, that's not appropriate. That's not appropriate. That's not appropriate." Whereas if you're Donald Trump, man, you can say whatever you want anytime in any kind of offensive capacity, and that's perfectly all right. It certainly. I mean, looking at the reaction that we have seen in the past weekend, it would suggest that what Kaepernick was doing has not, certainly within the confines of the league itself, the owners and the players, their reaction was being told by Trump, "You should fire these people." Their response was, "Hell no. That's not how we see the image of the NFL. That's not how we want it to be." Maybe there are fans that feel differently, but that's the owner and the players' reaction.
I think that part of it is that So if you're a conservative, right now Republicans, and I don't consider Trump to be a conservative, but Republicans are doing really good politically. Republicans have the Senate, the House, most state houses, the presidency, not getting much done, but in terms of holding office, they have a lock on a lot of things. We'll see how that goes in the midterms. And that's about it. I mean, the left basically has the culture, whether it's academia, the entertainment world, now the sports world. Sports used to be like a last final remaining like sort of vestige. I mean, like that was the one area where it was either leaning conservative or at least it was a respite for conservatives to go to. Like country music, the same thing. Conservatives are losing that too. I mean, there's always been like alt country, and it hasn't been clear cut, but you know, the Dixie. I'm talking about commercial radio. Country music was always pretty conservative, Merle Haggard kind of stuff. And so whether it's academia, Hollywood, entertainment, conservatives don't have any of that, and I think there's a real frustration. And football was a sort of conservative bastion for a long time. And now that's being taken away and it's being politicized. And I could just say personally, now I don't claim to be normal because like I work in politics. We talked about this last week with my rather crude joke. But because I work in politics all the time, I'm probably like, I want to turn on like late night comedy and like not be inundated with a serious lecture. You know what I mean? With someone who's like, the Johnny Carson jokes, I could laugh at. If Johnny Carson made fun of Donald Trump, I would find it freaking hilarious, right? Different than a lecture. And now we're seeing the same thing in our football. Sunday afternoon, you've worked hard all week. You want to crack open a beer, spend 3 hours watching a sport, and it's about Michael Sam, and it's about Colin Kaepernick, and what are we going to do? Look, when does it end? So I've decided to check out.
So I'm working on a piece related to this for Politico. It's not done yet. I'm not sure what's going to publish, but part of what I'm exploring is I'm just curious about your opinion here. Who comes out ahead politically here? So clearly Trump's playing to his base. His base loves this stuff. That's evident, but his base is not 50%. His loyal base is not even the 46% that he got in the election because his approval rating generally has been lower than that. Since Inauguration Day. So is this Trump stuck appealing to a narrow segment of the electorate that he can't break free from? Or is this gumming up the works for Democrats who are trying to find a way to get some of those white working class voters back, and they want to talk about the economy and bread and butter issues, and they can't because the culture war is always front and center because Trump always makes it front and center?
Well, I would say a couple things. One, I would say, even putting Trump aside, what bothers me is that this culture war, this, battle, this one skirmish in this culture war that we're fighting is just one more example of where basically it's the two Americas, but just not the way John Edwards saw it. I mean, you've got working class whites on one side and pretty much everybody else on the other, minorities and elites.
I would say it's non-college whites, as opposed to working class whites. And, I'm not trying to make a comment about intelligence. I just think there's a cultural difference, roughly speaking, that you see in poll after poll after poll. And I don't think income or occupation, because there are plenty of people who are non-college who are financially secure.
Right. I'm okay with that distinction, Bill. But so let's use your terminology. Non-college educated whites on one side and minorities, elites, college educated whites on the other. And quite frankly, I often come down on this other side, but I'm coming down on the side of the non-college educated whites, I guess, on this issue because patriotism is something that I feel very deeply about. You know what I'm saying? But whatever the case may be, like I think that divide is really growing, and I really feel that the sad thing is we're getting to a point where like there's not a lot of crossover. There used to be a lot more fluidity. You could have like non-college educated whites who voted Democratic, who were sort of, Joe Sixpack, union guy, right? We all got together and rooted for, the Packers together or whatever, the same bar. We were all like, it's just the sorting and the division. Like, we're getting to a point where people are very segregated, and it's going to be every issue. We're going to come down on different sides of it. We're not even going to watch the same sports. I'm going to be watching Aussie rules football, for crying out loud. That's what's coming.
Are there some Russian sports that your white non-college man can get into?
Maybe, I don't know.
Let me shift gears a little bit to another culture war front in Alabama.
Yeah.
So here you have Roy Moore being Luther Strange. Luther Strange, the incumbent senator who was appointed by former Governor Robert Bentley, who then they got ousted in a sex and corruption scandal. And that spilled over onto Strange. There's some question whether Strange didn't prosecute Bentley appropriately when he was state attorney general. He was backed by McConnell, which gave Moore the opening to say he's part of the swamp, he's part of the Republican establishment, we need to drain the swamp. But Strange was also endorsed by Donald Trump, who Trump's attacking Mitch McConnell for not repealing Obamacare, and he's praising Luther Strange. Roy Moore is attacking Luther Strange for not repealing Obamacare and siding with McConnell, even though both of them are for repealing Obamacare. It's not like they were votes against repealing Obamacare, but they're getting attacked by that. And then you get Steve Bannon swooping in, taking Moore's side as a first step in building a network of insurgent primary challengers to Republican incumbents, and taking great pains to say this is not a vote against Trump, this is a vote against McConnell. And that argument wins the day.
I found the most, and by the way, Palin and Gorka and others had been down there, I guess, holding rallies, and they were all implicitly saying, look, we know we love Donald Trump, but he has been, it was unclear, but it was basically like he's being manipulated, or he's got to support, he doesn't really want to support Luther Strange. He really prefers Roy Moore, or he's having, John Kelly's keeping him from finding out the real information. It was like, I don't know if it was like paternalistic. It should have been an insult, because you basically had to believe, so Donald Trump has endorsed Luther Strange. Either he's wrong, he's being duped, or he's being manipulated. I mean, it was like, I don't see how any scenario could jibe with Donald Trump being a good president and being, like, having decent judgment, and the argument that they were making. Just me?
Well, Bannon was saying, these people, the Republican establishment, they think you're morons. These people are looking down on you. They think you're stupid. Which is what, they also charge Democrats and liberals for saying about, white working class non-college voters all the time. But you say it about Trump. You say this guy doesn't have the leadership skills, the intelligence, the wisdom.
No, but they always exempted Trump, right? I mean, wasn't it always like Mitch McConnell is trying to con you, but Donald Trump, he has endorsed Luther, but you can't blame him. He didn't know what he was doing, right? Like,
and Trump's the biggest grifter of all. I mean, if anyone's conning the right here, it's Trump. It's Trump that just talks trash and never follows through and actually accomplishes anything. But it's all blame shifting on everybody else.
No, I tweeted
having
this
it both ways all the time.
I tweeted this right before we taped. But biggest winner from this could be Ted Cruz. If we've seen these stories that Ted Cruz allegedly wants to kind of rebrand himself as more of a team player, if that's the case, this is great news for Cruz, right? Now, Roy Moore becomes the insane guy who's like a pain in the butt. Cruz could sort of become more of a statesman. We'll see if that plays out.
Now, for folks who don't already know, Roy Moore is not a new figure on the national political scene. It was a huge story in, I think it was 2003, when he had a 10 Commandments I mean, it's not even just like a piece of paper on the wall. It was like this whole memorial sculpture in the Alabama courtroom that he lost that fight and was ousted from the Alabama Supreme Court. He gets back on the court several years later, refuses to follow the Supreme Court order acknowledging the rights for same-sex couples to have marriages. He's ousted from the court again. So he has been a leading culture warrior. I mean, he is a bona fide theocrat. He believes that the Constitution is godly. Anything that runs afoul of Christianity is inherently unconstitutional. And he seems determined to bring that philosophy to the Senate. He's not someone that McConnell can count on to be a team player and accept compromise. If there was a bill to keep the government open that kept Planned Parenthood money, Roy Moore is not going to vote for that. He's going to go down the well of the Senate. He's going to chew up time, get cameras on him, filibuster when possible.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, Bill. So, I'm a pretty conservative dude in some ways, but I think the problem also is that Roy Moore is a showman and is it's the sort of I think he is it's not just that he's conservative. It's that I think he's going to be a showman. I think he's going to grifter, maybe. That's what you said about Trump. So I think to me that's part of the problem.
I don't know if I'd call. I mean, I feel Trump's a grifter not just in his business dealings, but politically. I think he repeatedly says one thing and does another.
I don't know that I'm not sure how sincere Roy Moore actually is in all of this, or how much of it's just benefiting his political career and brand.
He may be a grandstander or a demagogue who's not going to accomplish anything. But I don't.
Okay, that's a better way of putting it.
But I don't think he's going to talk a theocratic line and vote differently.
I agree. Okay. I agree.
He is going to be who he says he is, no matter what the consequences are. So my question...
my point is not just ideology. It's style.
Yeah. Well, clearly he's someone who wants the spotlight for himself.
The guy brought out a gun the other day at a rally. Right. And he rides a horse to the polls.
Right. I mean,
He's not a guy who...
It's not a low-key guy.
Yeah.
So he is poised to be the face of social conservatism. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I think that would be very unfortunate and damaging. But if I was a liberal, that's exactly what I would try to make happen.
I mean, but how would that not happen? I mean, he is a showman. This is the issue of his entire career is this issue about Christianity's inherent linkage to the Constitution. How would he not become the face of social?
Okay, because the way it doesn't happen is there's 100 senators right now, and there's probably 20 of them that we hear about all the time, and there's 80 of them you never hear about. You know what I mean? When's the last time you heard about John Hoeven? You know what I'm saying? So, and part of it's because they keep a low profile, which Roy Moore won't. But part of it's because we are so focused on the national issues. You know what I mean? Nowadays. Even just compare how the little coverage that this Roy Moore versus Luther Strange race got compared to the Thad McCotter race of a couple years ago. That race got so much more coverage. And I think it's because Trump is really driving the agenda so much. It's become very celebritized. We're talking about the NFL. We're talking about Donald Trump. And we're talking about things like North Korea, pretty serious things too. So, I don't think that there's as much bandwidth to cover that, what some Alabama senator did or said as there used to be. That's one argument. I could completely see the media loving to obsess over the controversial and provocative things that we're sure pretty much guaranteed he's going to say and do. And he probably will go on TV and try to get attention for the stupid things he says and does.
So,
and I probably agree with him on a lot of the actual philosophy.
So,
but it's too dumb to fail.
By
the way, the book "Too Dumb to Fail" didn't it just play out in Alabama?
Yeah,
literally. The title actually is exactly right.
So, I mean, you don't always call yourself a social conservative, although you obviously have strong views on a lot of these issues. What should social conservatives do? Should they stand aside and let more, get behind him when he does grants down on these subjects, or are there church state lines that even social conservatives should feel should be drawn, and say, look, more doesn't really speak for all of us here. We don't all believe that a Christian God bless this Constitution.
Well, I don't know that thinking that. I mean, I think that God blessed America, and I don't think there's anything weird or wrong about that. But when he says, didn't he say things like God caused this earthquake because of gays? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's the stuff. And I'm paraphrasing. I don't know exactly. I'm sure he said a lot of crazy stuff. I'm not sure if that's one of them. That might have been Pat Robertson.
He gave an interview where he said that there's Sharia law in Illinois and Indiana right now.
Yeah. So I think that when he says things that cross the line, that Christian leaders should say so. And I think someone like Russell Moore of the Southern Baptist Convention is really distinct.
No relation between Russell Moore and Roy Moore, correct?
Oh yeah, no, I don't think there's any relation. That I didn't even put that together. That Russell Moore really, and he got a lot of flack for this, but he very much stood up against Trump, and I would hope and assume that he would do the same thing when cousin Roy says things that are beyond the pale.
Would you give the Democrat Doug Jones any shot of winning this race?
Yeah, I mean 10%.
So Doug Jones.
Sanders a chance.
I mean, if you don't know much about Doug Jones, he's an interesting guy. He was, I think, a U.S. attorney in the 90s. He prosecuted 2 Klansmen out of the 1963 church bombing that killed 4 girls. So it was a cold case, but they got 2 of the guys, and he successfully prosecuted them. He gives great speeches talking about that experience. So he's very passionate about issues about race and racial unity, but he's not John Bel Edwards from Louisiana. He's not pro-life. He has said, "I believe in climate science." I haven't heard him speak on gun control. I did see him give an interview where he wanted the existing background check system to have more funding, which I think that we even probably run afoul of the NRA. So my sense is he's probably not Second Amendment up and down. He certainly doesn't have any issue. He doesn't mention abortion or guns on his website, which typically, if you're a Southern Democrat, like, you put that right at the top. Man, I'm pro-life and I'm pro-gun, and then we can talk about everything else. Let's get that out of the way. He's not like that, but he is. I believe he's Alabama born and bred. His persona is Alabaman, and big if, not predicting it, there's a poll that came out a couple weeks ago that had a 4-point race, whether it was Moore or Strange, because the other camp's voters, some of them were going to stay home or vote for the other guy. So there's about a quarter of Strange voters that says, I'm not going to vote for Moore. Now, it is very possible that doesn't hold by December, after all the attack cats come rain down on Doug Jones, which are going to come. But in theory, if there is lingering bitterness on Strange voters, and Doug Jones can find a way to focus on anything but abortion and guns and climate, maybe he's got a shot.
I don't think we have to worry too much about that, but I would say I think Roy Moore the Todd Aiken thing could happen, where Roy Moore will say or do something else stupid on the campaign trail. That could be used against vulnerable Republicans in competitive districts running for Senate. They'll have to answer, Roy Moore said this. Do you agree with that? So it just complicates life for them. Obviously, as you've noted, Bill, this very much complicates life for Mitch McConnell. It was announced yesterday, as we're taping this, that Bob Corker is going to retire.
I mean, if you're an incumbent Republican senator, how do you interpret the Alabama result? I mean, you now know you can vote party line I mean, there's not a single vote Strange took that deviated from the party line.
In fact, Donald Trump caught him up, according to Donald Trump. I don't know if you saw this in the rally in Alabama. Donald Trump caught him up Luther Strange, and all these other senators, he would ask them for their vote on health care, and they would say yeah, can you do a picture with my family? Can we come to dinner with you? But Trump said he caught up Luther Strange, and Strange was like, yeah, whatever you want. I'm with you. Right. Tell me what you want me to vote for.
You could vote party line. You could have Trump's endorsement, but being seen in public with Mitch McConnell is enough to get a successful primary challenge against you. How does that make it possible for McConnell to herd cats? I mean, they got a deadline in December now to keep the government open again, and soon after that's going to be the debt ceiling. How do you get the support for that when you know a primary challenge is probably going to come? It's going to tag you on that.
I don't know how McConnell has any leverage to get anything done. And the problem, of course, is that not only does he have to keep the Roy Moores of the world happy, but he's also got the Lisa Murkowskis,
Susan Collins.
Yeah, and so I don't know how he gets to 50.
You need Democrats. I mean, he will need Democrats to do the basics as they needed them for this last deal. Which but you will need even more Democrats because you will probably lose more Republicans who don't want to be seen with you in public.
Yeah, but once you open the door to using Democrats, now it's not 50 anymore; it's 60.
Well,
so I don't know how he gets.
Well, it's 60 for almost anything. I mean, they have to pass a fresh budget resolution after September 30th, the new fiscal year.
Yeah.
The word I'm
talking though about. No, I agree with you. To get those very keeping the government open, but I mean to do infrastructure. You would have to, in order to get 60 votes, you would really have to make it a truly bipartisan bill, which would mean it's not going to be a Republican or a conservative bill. It's going to be very, very mixed. I mean, because in a way, it might even have to be more liberal to get Democrats to give Trump a victory.
And I can't see McConnell having the passion and the vision to do anything beyond the basic minimum with Democratic votes. Infrastructure is not the basic. You don't need to do an infrastructure bill. You don't need to do a tax reform bill. I mean, you need to, in a sense, that the president's pushing it, but the Republic survives without a tax reform bill. You will need to keep the government open. You will need to pay our debt obligations, and you will need to have a healthy bucket of Democratic votes to do those sorts of things. Anything that's going to go beyond that, I just don't see it.
Which I agree with you, and I think that's perfectly logical knowing what we know. But if you were to go back and sort of say, okay, we just won the presidency, we have the majority in the Senate, the majority in the House, we can use reconciliation. Does McConnell, does there come a point where the pressure? Now I don't even know if this would get the job done, but when the pressure to kill the filibuster, for the legislative filibuster, becomes, insurmountable.
I mean, I wrote that piece when the nuclear option happened. I said, you might, you will face pressure to get rid of the legislative filibuster. It was only a week afterwards that Trump said, go get rid of it. So I think that pressure's going to come. But I mean, McConnell seems extraordinarily adamant about it, that he would not get rid of the legislative filibuster. And I don't know if he would get the 50 votes to do it.
That's the point. You would have a better argument for getting rid of it if Republicans had done healthcare, done infrastructure, done taxes, got racked up all these, and then reconciliations, but we want to do more.
Right.
That would actually be a better argument. Now there's not really an argument for it.
I mean, they couldn't get 50 senators to vote for Obamacare repeal. You lose 3 on the rules change. McCain's not getting rid of the legislative filibuster. Graham is not getting rid of the legislative filibuster. Susan Collins is not. Lamar Alexander is not. Bob Corker is not. That's just not going to happen. But it might become a thing where Senate is gridlocked, and therefore that becomes an animating issue on the right. How dare you not get rid of legislative filibuster?
Maybe that becomes the litmus test issue for electing senators in primary.
Yeah.
I hope Steve Bannon doesn't listen to this podcast.
I do want to run because I got work to do, but in the interest of self promotion, for both of us, we both wrote Joe Biden pieces.
Yes.
Totally coincidentally.
Actually, totally coincidentally, but we did.
I pitched Politico myself on a piece, and then like the next day, Daily Beast came to you and said, "Hey, what do you think about this Biden thing?" But he had a blog post. He's one of the last remaining bloggers in American society on his Biden Institute website. He has 2 institutes. He has a domestic policy institute in Delaware. He's got a foreign policy institute at University of Pennsylvania. And he writes a blog post on the domestic site saying, well, we need to address issues surrounding the future of work. I reject this trendy idea from Silicon Valley executives about universal basic income where everybody gets a check whether you're working or not. That erodes the dignity of work, and I don't support that. And that got a lot of attention. You talked about that specifically. But he also said in the post that we can't blame businesses for everything that ails America, which cuts against the Bernie-crat line, where corporate influence is the main scourge. That is why we can't have nice things. And he also says cognitive capacity, not brawn, is the surest path to the middle class, which cuts against a prevailing notion amongst white non-college voters that college isn't all it's cracked up to be. And we should, and so when Bernie says free college, I'm not interested. Well, Biden says I am for free college, at least 2 years community college. So there's a mix of stuff there that's not just anti-Bernie or pro-Bernie or what have you. But I do think it adds up to an anti-populist vision where you're not bashing business, you're not pandering to white non-college, but you are talking about dignity of work, and having framing a policy agenda around that. Now, he hasn't fully fleshed out what that means exactly, but it doesn't seem like he's going to be hopping on a Democratic Socialist bandwagon. He's going to be blazing his own trail, and if he runs, and I feel there's a lot of indications here that he is going to run. You have a whole bunch of Democrats, piling on top of each other. I'm for single payer. I'm for single payer. I'm not going to be scared of what the naysayers have to say. Let's go big and go bold. Here's Biden, former VP, lots of loyal fans out there. Has a donor network. Is going to command the spotlight. Is smooth as honey on the campaign trail. Obviously has his gaffes, but
those are almost endearing. Right. The gaffes are like
it's gotten to a point where it's charming.
I want to get to that point,
but
that's just Matt being Matt.
I would think if anybody was going to stop the Bernie train, whether it's Bernie or someone in his mold, Biden is probably going to be your best bet.
Well, and Biden has he just oozes the working class populist thing, so he doesn't have to have those policies. He is he's from Scranton and all that. I do think his message really would resonate against Trump well in a general election. I think it's very much a general election message and positioning. I worry about the primary, about going against the Bernie Elizabeth Warren thing in a primary. But if anybody could do it, I think Biden is much better positioned to do it than almost anybody else. Because as I said, even if he advocates a more mainstream, traditional liberal, neoliberal position, his persona oozes the working class bona fides that I think could give him some cover.
I mean, so much is going to depend on the nature of the field. How fractured does the left get? Is there going to be a quick consolidation around Bernie or around Elizabeth Warren? Or is there going to be, we talked about lanes and brackets with the Republican primary all the time. There's going to be a populist lane or even a Democratic Socialist lane that could get very messy. And I think there's definitely a rising sense of confidence on the Democratic Socialist left. I see it in my Twitter feed all the time whenever I talk anything that runs afoul of that.
Which is all the time.
Which they fundamentally believe that the people are with us. This democratic, neoliberal, centralist, incrementalist pragmatism, it's discredited. No one likes it. Hillary was a failure. It doesn't inspire anybody. This is where the energy and the passion is. To the extent that's true, and that's, younger voters clearly believe that way more. If they're becoming more dominant in the Democratic primary, maybe that is, you got to own that to win. But if you see Biden out there and he is packing those union halls and he is finding a way to talk the talk of the Rust Belt without being racist, without being bigoted, and without being democratically socialist.
He should totally do what John McCain did. New Hampshire, VFW halls, coffee shops. I mean, guys with the VFW hats. I don't even know what those are called.
If they're images of that on TV, I do think they're still in the Democratic DNA. Is oh my God, how are we going to win in this country? How are we going to beat this map?
Right.
How are we going to convince? What's the matter with Kansas? How do we get those guys to come on our side? If a Bernie crowd looks like a bunch of college kids and a Biden crowd looks like a bunch of hard hats, people are going to say, wait a second, who really has got their finger on the pulse here?
Who's going to win in Lackawanna?
Right.
That's what I want to know. I like it. Well, check it out. I wrote my piece at The Beast. You wrote your piece at Politico magazine. So check those out and follow us here at the DMZ. It's at DMZ Show on Twitter. We couldn't get at the DMZ. It's at DMZ Show. Follow that. Follow Bill. Your podcast is
This Is Not Normal at liberaloasis.com, iTunes, and Stitcher.
Mine is Matt Lewis and the News. And don't forget, you can listen to this as well. You don't have to look at us. You can listen to this. You're out for a jog. You want to listen. Check that out.
All right. Until next week.
You got it. See ya.